If you watched our video on the cities Black Americans are leaving, then you're likely familiar with the Great Migration we mentioned in that video. But just in case you're not, here's a two-sentence overview. Historically, Black Americans have moved from the South to the North, especially between 1910 to 1970, in a trend known as the Great Migration. However, recently there's been talk of a new Great Migration occurring where many Black Americans are leaving the parts of the country they once moved to. So, today on Across the Globe, we're going to be looking at the states that Black Americans are leaving. As a quick note, most of the data is from past decennial U.S. censuses and the Census Bureau American Community Surveys. Number 9. Wisconsin. Between 2015 and 2020, Wisconsin saw 8,575 Black Americans leave for other parts of the country, making it the state with the 9th highest number of Black Americans leaving. While this might not sound like a large number of people, it is more significant when you take a look at the demographics of Wisconsin. For instance, the entire population is only about 5.9 million people. Furthermore, according to the latest census data, Black Americans only make up 6.6% of the state, which, if you do the math, equates to a little over 389,000 people. Interestingly, this decline isn't new. Between 2005 and 2010, for instance, Wisconsin saw an even greater decline in its Black population, with a loss of 16,065 people. Considering that the population of the state back then was even smaller, that number is all the more significant. Of course, this makes us ask the question, what's the reason behind this decline? Well, the truth is that the factors are varied, and there's not a ton of data on this, but we did find a few things. One is that there appears to be a lot of inequity in the school systems here. For instance, a UCLA report discovered that high schools in Wisconsin suspend Black students at a rate that's the highest in the country. Furthermore, Wisconsin has the second highest disparity between Black and white students when it comes to suspensions. Milwaukee, the biggest city in the state, appears to particularly struggle with this, as schools there suspend Black high school students at a rate about double the average nationwide. There also appears to be inequity when it comes to incarceration, as Wisconsin imprisons the highest number of Black men in the country. Finally, segregation is another issue, with Milwaukee being the most segregated city in the entire U.S. Number 8. Massachusetts. Massachusetts saw 9,820 Black Americans leaving between 2015 and 2020, putting it at number 8 on our list. About half of these people have moved to southern states and cities like Atlanta, a key example of the new Great Migration in action. Like we saw in Wisconsin, this loss isn't really anything new. Between 1995 and 2000, for instance, Massachusetts saw 6,538 Black people leave. Between 2010 and 2015, that number was 4,085. Again, the reasons for this are complex, but become more clear when we look at Massachusetts' capital and biggest city, Boston, for an explanation. Boston has long struggled with pervasive racism. For instance, in 1974, there was strong resistance to school desegregation in the Boston area, indicating underlying racial tensions. Today, there are still issues with ongoing discrimination lawsuits creating an unwelcome environment for Black Americans. Additionally, rising housing prices in Boston with a current median home sale of $770,000 has made it less affordable. Number 7. Michigan. Michigan saw a loss of 10,380 Black Americans between 2015 and 2020. Furthermore, the state has seen a loss of Black people for decades now. For instance, between 1985 and 1990, there was a loss of 14,600 Black Americans. Between 1995 and 2000, that number jumped to 16,449. Between 2005 and 2010, it was 76,470, and between 2010 and 2015, it was 6,971. A big part of the reason for this is that Black people are moving away from Detroit, which has historically had the most Black residents out of any other city in the U.S. until recently. It also has the highest percentage of Black people at 76%. According to the Michigan Chronicle, for instance, Detroit has lost about 295,000 black residents, which equates to approximately 37.4% of its black population since the year 2020. Of course, not all of these people are leaving the state entirely, and some of them are relocating to elsewhere in Michigan. However, you can be sure that at least some of those people are, in fact, relocating out of state. But why are people leaving? Well, the reasons for this exodus are varied, but the biggest factors, according to a survey conducted by the Detroit Metro Times, include finding job opportunities elsewhere and leaving to flee violent crime. Number 6. Louisiana. Louisiana is yet another state that has seen a decline in its black population. Between 2015 and 2020, for instance, the state saw 27,685 black people moving elsewhere. Like we've seen when it comes to other states so far, this trend isn't new. However, what does separate Louisiana from the other states we've looked at is how many people have left the state in recent decades and how long ago this trend started. For example, Louisiana saw a loss of 37,067 black residents way back between 1965 and 1970. Then 46,053 black people left Louisiana between 1985 and 1990. Between 2005 and 2010, this number jumped all the way to 79,360, likely due to the effects of Hurricane Katrina. Finally, between 2010 and 2015, Louisiana lost 15,835 black residents. So, what's causing this net negative migration? Well, people are leaving Louisiana mostly out of a desire to find a better quality of life and improved work opportunities elsewhere. This shouldn't come as much of a surprise, considering that Louisiana has the highest poverty rate in the nation at 19.5%. Number 5. Mississippi. Between 2015 and 2020, Mississippi saw a loss of 29,005 black residents who moved to other states. However, this decline has been going on for decades. Between 1965 and 1970, Mississippi saw 66,614 black residents move out. Between 1975 and 1980, that number was 20,106. 1985 to 1990 saw a net loss of 19,522 black people, and 2010 to 2015 a net loss of 4,445. There are many reasons for this, but an underlying reason is likely the long history of systemic racism that the state has seen. Take the Jackson water crisis, for instance, which happened in 2022, when the city's biggest water treatment plant failed and left 160,000 people, including hospitals and schools, without safe drinking water. You might be wondering how this is systemic racism. Well, PBS notes that 80% of residents in Jackson are black and 25% live in poverty, and that when it comes to water scarcity and contamination, communities of color are the most vulnerable. They also noted that as white and middle-class black families left the state, leading to less revenue, the state failed to make up the difference and infrastructure suffered as a result. But that's not the first time that the city has seen water issues. In 2010, residents were without water for weeks after a storm caused damage to the water plant. In 2012, Jackson was found to violate the Clean Water Act. This list goes on. Additionally, a recent study conducted by 24/7 Wall Street found that Mississippi is the 17th worst state in the country for Black Americans to live due to segregation that's still an issue today. For instance, approximately 57% of Black residents live in majority Black neighborhoods, the third highest in the country. There's also a lot of disparity between Black and white residents when it comes to poverty. Here, the poverty rate for Black Mississippians is 31.6% compared to 12.8% for white Mississippi residents. Number 4. New Jersey. Coming in at number 4 on our list is New Jersey, which saw a loss of 55,230 Black residents between 2015 and 2020. Like many other states on this list, this isn't new, considering New Jersey has seen a consistent decline in its Black population since 1985. Interestingly, That study I mentioned by 24/7 Wall Street ranked New Jersey as the 8th worst state for Black Americans and the 2nd worst state for Black people in the entire Northeast. This is primarily due to health disparities. For instance, the infant mortality rate for Black residents in New Jersey is 9.9 for every 1,000 births, compared to 3.2 per 1,000 for white residents in the state. There are also a large number of racial disparities when it comes to the state's justice system. Additionally, housing costs may play another role. When New Jersey's largest county, Bergen County, for instance, saw a large decline starting back in 2016, this was explained by the prohibitive cost of housing. Number 3, California. Number 3 is California, which saw a net loss of 58,095 Black residents between 2015 and 2020. Interestingly, this decline is more recent than the other states we've looked at so far. In fact, until recently, California had historically seen a net increase in Black residents, or at least a stable number. Between 1995 and 2000, however, California saw a net loss of 63,180, and the state has pretty much seen a continuation of this trend since then. So, what's causing this? Well, it seems that people are largely relocating for 3 reasons: to be able to buy an affordable home, be near better schools, and live in an area with lower crime. Of course, while many Black residents are moving out of the state entirely, some are also just relocating to other cities within the state. And when we look specifically at the cost of housing and cost of living, it's no surprise people are leaving the state to find more affordable opportunities elsewhere. For instance, the cost of living index is the 3rd highest in the nation at 136.4 compared to the U.S. index of 100. The median home sale as of September 2023, meanwhile, was $786,500 compared to the U.S. median sale of about $412,000. Number 2, Illinois. Number 2 on our list is Illinois. Between 2015 and 2020, this state saw a whopping net negative migration of 93,415 Black residents. If you look at that study conducted by 24/7 Wall Street, this exodus shouldn't be too surprising. They ranked Illinois as the 4th worst state in the country for Black people due to its large number of segregated cities and inequality when it comes to work and income opportunities. For instance, Black unemployment in the state is 14.1%. Compare that to white unemployment, which stands at only 4.5%. Similarly, Black incomes are far below those of white residents. Here, the average Black household earns about $38,500 per year, compared to the state's median income of approximately $71,900 for white households. Chicago, in particular, has seen a large number of residents leaving due to the factors I mentioned, along with systemic racism, violence, and gentrification. Many of these people are moving to states like Indiana, Texas, Georgia, and Arizona. Number 1, New York. Number 1 on our list is New York State, which saw a loss of 229,425 Black residents between 2015 and 2020. We can unsurprisingly chalk up most of the reason for this to the cost of living, which has been on the rise for a while now. This is especially the case in New York City, which has seen a decline in its Black population by about 9% over the past 2 decades due to the ever-increasing cost of living in the city. For instance, while the median home sale in the state of New York is only a little above the national median at $491,000, the median home sale in New York City is $770,000. But it seems that Black residents are struggling when it comes to home ownership even outside of New York City. For instance, the home ownership rate among Black residents of New York State is 31.3%, compared to 63.6% of New York's white residents. Furthermore, the state has a high degree of income inequality, with the average Black household in New York earning about $48,500 a year, compared to the average white household income of approximately $76,700. What about every state ranked worst to best?